Hello, 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 and welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissel, and joining me, as always, Garrett Zatlin. How's it going, man?
There's a little more pizzazz on
Yeah,
that.
I feel like I'm trying to tweak it every episode, like
I
just
liked
see
it.
where it goes. Maybe we'll land with something kind of a little different than normal.
Yeah, you know what else is different than normal? One, the Sixers winning basketball games. I'm now 100% back in. I regret everything I said. I'm ready to be heard again. Two, what's also new, we have one new rating and review we got on Spotify. Thank you for someone doing that on Spotify. If you are on Apple Podcasts, please go to our show page, scroll down to the bottom. You'll see 5 stars. You also will be able to write a comment as well. If you could do that, that'd be fantastic. Thank you so much. On Spotify, again, on the homepage, you can see little stars there. Give us a 5 star. That'd be fantastic. We're also on YouTube. Go check out YouTube. A lot of great stuff on YouTube. So go check out some of that. And Ben, with the housekeeping items out of the way, I'm ready to go for today.
All right, and I appreciate that one rating because I put out a call and it would have really hurt my ego.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Zero. So one is not great, but it's much better than zero. So that made me at least feel a little bit better about myself. With all that said, we have some like transfer stuff to go over, a little bit recruiting. We have a few results. This really wasn't a very big weekend in terms of big time performances. We could maybe get into maybe some of those reasons later, but we don't have a ton to talk about there. So let's start with one of the probably biggest pieces of news from this past week that I think has flown under the radar a little bit, and that is Alexandra Millard headed to Boston College. She's coming from the English school systems. I looking at her power of 10, I think she's going to have about at least 2 full years of eligibility. We don't have any confirmation on that, but just looking at the races she's run, it would appear that is the case. And that is important because she comes in with some fantastic PRs. She's run 409 in the 1500, 858 in the 3K, 1527 in the 5K. So Boston College got themselves a stud, and they will be happy to have her for as long as she has eligibility in the NCAA.
Yeah, this is a monumental. It's a monumental win for Boston College. It's they really had a handful of great pieces. Like I think one of the most impressive coaching jobs from last year was Pete Watson. Getting
Mhm.
women like I want to say like Sarah Flynn and who was the Emma Tavella from UCLA. These were women that were all good, but they weren't. Well,
Stars.
hey, right? They weren't low stick or lead scorers for a national qualifying team. And I'm not even saying that they were stars, but the entirety of this team came together so incredibly well. And really, the only one who I think they're losing is Flynn. And so you bring in everyone else who's now had experience, has continued to improve. This is all based on Tifers, by the way. And now you add in, a low stick ace who I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. They lose to Vela. They do lose to Vela, and then I think they also lose Flynn as well. So I'd have to go back and double check that. So you lose your top scorer, but then you effectively replace her with someone who is, let's just put it
Potentially
how it
much
is.
better.
She's significantly better. That's nothing against Vela, but you're talking about someone who can go to Nuttycombe and get you in somewhere in the top 15 or top 20. So
Yeah, and I think her coming over with these times, especially after we've seen the success of like Amy Bunnage, Doris Lemngole, who obviously had faster times, but you've seen these women come in from overseas and make instant impact. And Millard's times look like she could potentially have that kind of impact for Boston College. And we've talked about this program needing that maybe like real true low stick, and we talked about I think Alex Carlson being someone that would really give them an
mhm.
injection of talent at the top. And but for Millard, I think this is an even better win for Boston College to get her with her potential eligibility and just how well she's been running as of late. It's everything you could have wanted from them. It's a coup that they were able to land her. I'm sure she had there was a lot of competition for her signature, and for them to come out on top is significant, not only for the coming years in terms of how much better she's going to make this program, but it's significant in terms of the statement of intent that this program has for future recruits, future transfers, as they look to Boston College as a potential option for them.
And that's exactly what I think was one of the biggest ones, that you kind of point out. One of the biggest takeaways is this is big for Boston College. Like, Molly Hudson and Natalie Millarova were great this past winter. Awesome. And they were good, but Miller now gives you someone who can have a 3-season national meet presence,
Yep.
competing for All American honors. She allows more lineup, versatility. Especially on the track too, in terms of what she can and can't do. Um, it just gives Boston College more of a presence at the ACC championships, which is crazy because the ACC is about to get busier with the introduction of Stanford as
Yep.
well. So it's in California and SMU, but the biggest takeaway there, I think is right. BC now has like a nationally recognized presence with this star, and Molly Hudson is returning. Millarova is returning, and I'll just tell you this: Hudson is she's from England, and I think Millarova is too. I have to go back and double check that. So if you think about kind of how this all built up, if they didn't have Mudson and Millarova, do they get Millard?
Almost certainly not. Like I found that to be, obviously I had British.
Millarova was Czech Republic. Excuse me.
Okay, I've had British teammates, and a lot of the reason they came was because they knew someone that came over and did the same thing. We had at Belmont Marcus Bridger Wickelson, who was awesome, and his success brought more people there to our program. So I'm sure it's the same kind of knock on effect if you see success from someone coming from England as well. It makes you a lot more likely to come. And that's a pipeline that can be extremely profitable. We've seen that for a handful of programs. Tulsa comes to mind as one program who's done very, very well. Bradley did it to a lesser extent when they
Yep.
made the national championship on the men's side a couple years back. So for them to open up that pipeline, and like I said, I think as this program progresses, I think they're going to get a lot more eyeballs in terms of the recruits that are willing to come there. But to have that English pipeline is a massive, massive win.
2 questions. First question: what would you rank the Boston College women, knowing that they lose Tavella, they lose Sarah Flynn,
Yeah.
but they bring back everyone else, they add Millard, who knows, maybe someone else
Mm-hmm.
new comes in. Where, if when we're chatting in July, where are we ranking them? If
And
at
this is
all.
kind of baking in a little bit of, I think they're going to get at least one other person.
Yeah.
I think like 15th. Is that about right?
I don't know if I would have gone quite as high as 15th, but would I have said somewhere in the top 20? Yeah. I would have
Yeah.
probably said like 17th, 18th.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, I was leaning more 20th just with Millard, but like I said, I just got to imagine they're going to pick up at least one or two other names that are going to bolster that lineup and push them closer to 15.
Second question: what is going to be her best event on the track?
Ooh, you see that I was looking at these PRs and trying to figure that out myself. I think uh, it kind of should be the 3K, although
Yeah.
that's kind
Okay.
of like
Yes.
the PR that isn't as exciting. I don't know. I think
It's still good, but it's just
right,
not as
but it's not like
comparable.
409.
Right.
I think I'm gonna stick with the 3K though. I think the more opportunities she gets to run it, she clearly has the speed and the strength. I think that's ultimately where it's going to be her best event.
Yeah, and I think Watson, there's more of a middle distance focus there,
Yeah.
and that's not to say that he can't coach long distance or anything along those lines. That's not what I'm saying. But in terms of wanting to utilize DMR lineups, milers and 1500-meter runners, you probably want to combine that middle distance turnover with that 5K endurance. In
Yep.
theory, that makes the 3K her best. We'll see, but all right, that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, again, makes her kind of the perfect runner for a Pete Watson program in terms of she's going to be able to help out a lot in the grass, but also be someone that he can move around like a queen on the chessboard when it
Hmm.
comes to the track, which will be insanely valuable. Moving on from her, we have some transfer portal news. First up on our list is Wilma Nielsen of Washington. She is back on the portal, just transferred from Bradley to Washington this past year. She has, I think, at least one season of cross country and outdoor, potentially two or more in the indoor season. She's coming off a sixth place finish at indoor nationals in the 800. It's run 202 several times. Is looking like she's back where she was a couple years ago when she was firing at her best. Interesting to see her back on the portal. Obviously, I think we all have a good idea where she could land if she wants to reunite with her old coach, who is down in New Mexico. Is there any other options that you see for her, or is that kind of the one you keep coming back to?
I can't help but think, because here's where I also find myself going back to. It's not just her that we have to consider. Her sister, Julia
Right.
Nielsen, I'm not saying that she is in the transfer portal. I'm not saying that she will transfer, but I find it interesting that their coach is now at New Mexico. When after certain athletes graduate, you can open up scholarships to whatever's remaining to the athletes that you want to recruit and you want to bring in.
Mm-hmm.
And if Gossen's like, hey, Nielsen's on the portal and we've worked together and she found great success with him, well, why would Julia Nielsen not want to do the same thing when
Sure.
she's got a full year of eligibility and her sister's now on the move again? So I can't help but wonder like what this means for Julia Nielsen too, someone who just ran 202 for 50 or 800 meters. So, I can't help but think New Mexico wouldn't just be like a clear option. Am I crazy to say Oregon for Wilma Nielsen?
No, it's hard to say like where she might end up without like knowing a little bit more about why this is happening. Obviously, she doesn't have like a geographical pool toward anywhere in the states, so there isn't that like we normally would lean towards. And so I think that's why the coaching, going back to an old coach, makes is like the only like string that we have to pull on. But if for whatever reason it just didn't, like, she didn't enjoy the school or the program, whatever it was in Washington, but wants to stay in the Northwest, I think Oregon does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's the one thing I'm just not sure. I don't know where like I would even place her. Just because you go from Bradley, it's like, well, you can kind of go anywhere.
Yeah.
Like when you have someone NCAA number 2 all time 1K, she does go to Washington. It makes sense.
Hmm.
But now I just don't quite know. And the only other place that I think from a skill set perspective makes sense is Oregon, off the top of my head. So
If she
um,
wants to go all the way back out east, I'm going to pitch Providence again. But I think again we don't have any good link toward really very many
right.
schools.
Right. So, yeah, interesting. I was surprised. I made sure I had two contacts on this, and I was like, "You mean Wilma Nielsen, the one who's at Washington?" They're like, "Yes." I was like, "Gotcha. Okay. Are you sure?" They're like, "Yeah, we're looking at it. Yes." Like, okay, we'll just check it. Like,
I know.
so,
I saw in the Slack when we were talking about it, and I was very surprised. I was like, I feel like this just happened.
it just happened. So, um, all right, let's move on. We got one more, right?
Yes, Emma Heckel of New Mexico is in the transfer portal. She has at least 1 year of eligibility left. Her PR is 15:41 in the 5K, 32:31 in the 10K, and she's had very good success in cross country in the past. In 2022, 38th at NCAA's. Haven't seen a ton of her recently. So not sure exactly where she's at now. It's been about a year really since we've seen her finish a race. Still very talented athlete who I think would be a big could be a potentially a big piece for any cross country team in the country. I think you have some idea of where she might end up, so I'm gonna throw out some teams
Okay.
and
Can I just add
yes,
a
go ahead.
clarifier in there? So she has put out there, a post on her Instagram page
Okay.
basically saying like, she basically there was injuries. She's had injury
Okay.
troubles throughout
Fair enough.
2023. She's recognized that it was a challenging year for her. Um, so then that makes sense. So when
Mhm.
she's healthy and when she's at her best, killer killer name, awesome name. Sorry, go ahead.
So I think NAU
Mm,
is like the first one that comes to the top of my head. We've seen some New Mexico to NAU before. I think would make a lot of sense in terms of them loading up with another great cross country runner. Geographically can make sense. Just a short move over to Flagstaff. The other school that is kind of coming to mind is if she wants to go out east again, and this isn't, I have no indication that that would be the case. NC State really needs someone like Emma Heckel,
yeah.
and I think she would be perfect for them as someone who can kind of be a little bit of a stopgap. They've been just losing so much talent out the door, and they got a lot of youngsters who are stepping up. But I think they just need someone to kind of plug a hole in the lineup for another year to let everyone else develop a little bit more. I think NC State would be a great fit for her.
I'd agree. I think the obvious one though that you and I both kind of know is Louisville, right?
Sure. Right. Of course.
Because I mean, so obviously former coach um, Joe Franklin, previously at New Mexico, leaves this past summer to head to Louisville. Now the director there has now had a year to kind of like get himself situated.
Yep.
Certain athletes graduating again, maybe some scholarships open up around there. It would make perfect sense. And so I have been told where she's looking. I am not really ready to kind of spill the beans on that yet, but I think it just like whether you know or not, I think Louisville just makes a
Yeah.
perfectly great potential landing spot for her. So
We haven't seen a lot of New Mexico athletes head to Louisville. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my
there
head.
was one.
Yeah, which is kind of
Um,
surprising because in this era where coaches move and there's the transfer portal, you usually see. I mean, you saw it with Coach Gaussen headed from Bradley to New Mexico, brought a lot of Bradley athletes with him, but we really didn't see many New Mexico runners head to Louisville.
yeah, I'm looking now. I'm trying to figure out there because there was what was the one specific name. This is going to bother me because I know. All right, I'll have to get back to you on that one, but yeah, I do remember us reporting that move to Louisville. It was some. It was like I think one of the more developmental athletes, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was someone who was a little bit on the younger side, which made more sense to me. So yeah, I think she's going to be in high demand. Emma Heckel is.
Lauren Betancourt, that's who it
Okay.
was. Lauren Betancourt.
There
Yeah.
you go. Good
Sorry, go
good
ahead.
pull.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think Heckel's going to be a great pickup for whoever lands her. I think she's going to be in demand across the country as someone who, when healthy, like you said, it can absolutely be a top two, top three runner for your cross country team, no problem. And at her very best, has the potential of scoring in the 10K at nationals. So I think she will be. It'll be very fascinating to see where she ends up.
So when you were listing the potential teams
Hmm.
that you thought she could land with, do you think those are teams that you think need someone like her the most or could like alter the trajectory of that team the most? Or do you just think that those are potential landing spots just due to fit
NAU fit is where that
and
comes
NC State
from.
utility,
NC
right?
State's more of like need. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say because I'm trying to figure out like what's the one school where it's like, well, if they get her and she's at 100%, she's healthy,
sure.
what is the like how do they how did their trajectory change? And I'm trying to figure out what that team would be.
Um,
And I
of
can't help but think
Virginia,
I was
maybe.
thinking Stanford.
Okay.
I think Stanford, maybe Oregon. Maybe not Oregon. I don't know. I don't know. I can't. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought about it.
Yeah, I feel like we're inching towards it, but we're not full and we're not really even wading into cross country waters yet. And this would be such a cross country transfer that like I feel like once we start putting together our rankings a little bit for the team side, we'll be like, oh, this would have been an obvious, like, the huge, like, dynamic pickup for this team because they
You're
just
right.
need one more piece
Right.
to really transform them. So I'm sure there's a couple schools out there that it would be the case. Anything else on the transfer side before we run through some results?
No, let's get to some results.
Alrighty, so not a whole lot in terms of like the longer distance side. We didn't see. I mean, after we saw a bunch of fast 5K, 10Ks, we saw some very impressive performances though in the middle distances. And first, we're gonna start with Darius Kipyego, 145.76, coming off of a great indoor season where he really seemed to take a big step forward. This looks like another nice step forward for him, running 145, picking up the win. I don't know how much we learned about him, but I think this does show that his ceiling is a little bit higher than maybe I would have thought coming into this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly higher than we thought coming into this year. The funny thing is that he's never run under 147 on an outdoor track before until this past
Just
weekend.
skip the
So just
146.
skip. Now, granted, he made a leap this past
Yeah,
winter, right?
running
And he
146.
made
Yeah.
a into the 146 range, I think twice, was
Hmm.
sixth on the national stage. I think you're right. I think we've both known that he's like, just in terms of raw talent, like supremely like fit,
Hmm.
supremely great. Like he's awesome. In the past, it's been dude show up on in the postseason basically, which
Yep.
he did this past
Hmm.
winter, which was great. And now he's building on that and building on that. I still don't think he's a title contender yet. I'd probably need to give him a year and one more year until that happens. But I mean, he's now entering a territory where it's like, all right, yeah, you may not be a title contender, but like you might just be fit enough and proven enough after this past winter to be in a borderline All American lock.
Yeah, I think he's in that second tier behind Bizimana, Whitmarsh, and maybe the name that we'll talk about next. I think he maybe is like in that next
Hmm.
group. And I think that's obviously if you're in that group, then you're very close. And if there's in terms of being a national contender and another good performance here or there, then he keeps improving the way he has over the last few months. Maybe all of a sudden we are talking about him as a contender when it comes to May or June. So yeah, I really, really like where his progression's going. He seems to be just checking every box that you would want him to as he goes throughout his last few races. And if he continues that trajectory, I think that he could be in some really interesting places. But let's talk about the guy who did win NCAA's this past indoor season in the 800, and that is Rivaldo Marshall of Iowa. He comes out, dominates, runs 148, 145.86. Huge run for him. And I mean, I'm almost ready to put him in that top tier. I think you win an NCAA title, you come out and you run this kind of time, just beating the doors off of everybody. I can
Yeah.
only imagine what I think he's 145 low in a very competitive race. I think he is as dangerous as anyone in the 800.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly, I think the initial things during the winter, it's like, well, he's new to the NCAA, and like he's only raced a handful of times,
Hmm.
and he had a really poor Big Ten performance, and then you go to nationals, it's like yes, he won the national title, but like let's just have an honest conversation.
Yeah.
Soft year for the 800 just
Hmm.
was, especially when the top two seeds just can't get out of the prelims. And yes, oh well, that's just how the national meet works. Those are the eight best guys. I'm like, nah, I'd still put Busy Mana as the best
Yeah.
800 meter runner in the country. Sorry, but now that he has a 145, there is very few arguments for you to say that he's not in that top tier. He's run 145, which is absolutely a time that can win you a national title,
Hmm.
and he's won the national title. And he's been getting slightly better and slightly better with each passing week. He's beaten some key names before during the regular season. I think this is substantial. Still want to see a little bit more like one-on-one, matchups there, but it's hard to dislike him. Like he just has earned every bit of being considered now an upper echelon guy. And so here, how about this? Right now, right now, knowing what you know about all three of these athletes, rank them: Busy Mono, Whitmarsh, and Rivaldo Marshall.
I think I will go Busy Mono 1 still. I still have faith that he can win. It's interesting because I think Marshall and Whitmarsh are like the different sides of the same coin in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Busy Mana can win in a just a run from the gun super fast, or I think he can also win in a more of a tactical, like where it's a little bit slower. Maybe there's a little bit more pushing and shoving. Like it's not quite full out, kind of like how this past NCAA's was in the final. I think he can win both those races. Whitmarsh, I think, can win just if it's straight from the gun. Whoever has the most fitness, most talent is going to win. If it turns into something a little different, then I think that's where Marshall has proven that he can win because he did it at NCAA's. So I'm ultimately going to land with Marshall at number 2 because I think this 145 shows that he could probably hang in that. Just it's fast from the start. It's not obviously a 144 like Whitmarsh, so he still needs to progress a little bit more for me to feel comfortable in him running. Just I think he's going to have to run at least 145 low to win a title.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he needs to show a little bit more for me to feel confident with that. But he's proven that he can be tactically sound. He made such a strong move at NCAA's to win that race, and it was so smart that if for whatever reason it looks a little bit like that during the outdoor championships, I just have a lot more confidence in him winning that kind of scenario than Whitmarsh, and so ultimately I have Whitmarsh at 3rd.
That was great. I love that. That was a great explanation. Also, by the way, where was this during the winter? Like, we now have 4 guys at 145 or faster. And during the winter, we didn't have anyone break 146 based on raw times. Busy Mana did with the conversion. But, like, the men's 800 was, like, without question, the most unexciting middle or long distance events during the winter season. Now, so far in this early season of the spring months, without question, this is the best event that we've seen in the outdoor track season so far among middle and long distances.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always wonder if it's just like getting out, like a lot of these and
So
none
the
of these guys are
spacing
like,
of an outdoor
yeah,
track.
like not like huge guys, but just being able to let your legs kind of just breathe, and you're not worried about stepping on the rail or the bank track or stepping on somebody else. Like I think it is such a difference to be running on the outdoor oval than the indoor oval, at least in my experience. But we traditionally do see fast times during the indoor season, so it's hard to like say that's the explanation.
Yeah. So great runs, awesome runs. Now let's move to some 15s on the women's side, right?
Well, do
Oh
we
no,
want to
sorry.
touch on one more 800 result?
Yes, we do. We do.
Sanford's Zephaniah Carico-McLennan
That's pretty
running.
good.
Yeah, I went for it. Well, it might not be right. 147.6 at Alabama, beating a lot of Alabama's 800-meter runners. He put in a really, really strong performance there. I believe it's a PR for what Tiefers has as a sophomore, coming off of a pretty uninspiring indoor season. He's come out and run well in both of his races during the outdoor season. 347 at Raleigh for the 1500-meter, good run there, and then following that up with an even better performance, 147 dominant win at the Crimson Tide Invitational.
So I just looked up his World Athletics profile to make sure that we weren't missing like a prior PR or anything like that. No, we aren't. So he just had a 3.58 second PR. That I'm sorry, almost very or close to that. It was very close to that. He just had a 3.46 PR, second PR. We went from 151.1 to 147.6, which is insane. And like he's good, right? Like he was winning Southern Conference titles over 800 meters. Like just ran 347. Like he's a nice runner, but like 147 is so out of nowhere. Like, and there's not even any history based on Tiefers and World Athletics. So these guys always pop up every now and then, but I don't know what to think about that.
I can't tell you, and I'm sure obviously you're a runner probably if you are listening to this podcast, but I can't tell you how hard that is to go from 151 to like sub 150. It took me 5 years to do that. And granted, I'm not as talented a like pure 800-meter runner as Carico-McLennan is. But to do that is just, I mean, just to go from 151 to 149 is such a difficult feat. He just blew straight past that and made it look easy. Like it is such a hard thing to do when you're already at what is a very solid level at the 800 to make that big of a jump. His next race, I think, will be one of the more interesting ones to watch. Like, do we see him revert to like 150 again? Do we see him continue to progress? Like, it could go a lot of different directions from here for him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I'll be interested because there's always a couple guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always a couple guys, and then they kind of give you some mixed performances, and you don't really know, and they're just kind of hit or miss. So, yeah, I'll be extremely fascinated to see what he does next.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to some 1500 meters on the women's side. Doris Lemngole, 4:11 in the 1500. She continues to impress me with her speed.
Mm-hmm.
Like we came in thinking that she would be such an aerobic powerhouse and someone that wouldn't be able to really compete super well at the end of races because maybe her lack of speed or like her speed endurance. That has not been the case. Like, I mean, obviously she's had to go up against Parker Valby, and I think in maybe a Parker Valby from a year or two ago, I think those would be some pretty interesting races. But Valby's
Yep.
obviously on a different level right now. I all these like miles and 1500 meters that we've seen from her just seem to indicate that when Valby's gone, she could be like the next one up because she can run any pace, like almost any pace. And it seems like she's building that speed to be able to close races pretty well as well.
Yeah, I mean, 4:11 is certainly like I didn't know if she was going to run faster than 4:13, four
Yeah.
fourteen this year. So, yeah, that's pretty substantial. And I think we, as we saw, like even the like those time trial races, like I don't know if you remember the Boston U race where she ran 15:03, I think, or
Yeah.
15:04, something like that. You kind of look at those kind of races. She was like behind the pack, or like the main chase pack, with like a lap or two to go. But then she passed them all and got second. So
Mhm.
she must have had a really strong
Yeah.
late race surge or kick or move or whatever it was. And so it's these moments, kind of like you're saying, sticking around late in races on the national stage, consistent, but can still run really well in aerobic centric, hard from the gun kind of affairs. It's definitely more it's a more well-rounded skill set, or like at least a racing prowess than I think we initially expected.
Absolutely. If we don't see Valby come back next academic year, is she the favorite in
In the fall, yeah.
everything from the 5K up, including cross country?
Um, mm, yeah,
Yeah, I think
probably,
so.
right?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
which is
barring
it's
someone making a massive leap, right?
right, of course, and that seems to happen almost every year. But I mean, she's just come in and everything's translated so quickly. Like I think there was a little bit of concern on that proved uh, unneeded about her ability to just translate that pure talent and fitness into the NCAA, and she has done that immediately and as well as we could have expected.
And the craziest part is like her her biggest competition next year might be Hilda Olomamwe, her
Yeah,
teammate.
her teammate.
And it's like, okay, maybe Amy Bunge makes a jump, but like, yeah, I mean, it's really hard to figure out who that's
I
going to be. Like, go
I
ahead.
do wonder if we're going to see, and obviously I don't think the times are necessarily going to fall off a cliff, but
I
like
think Bila Chipkuri would be the other one that I
that's a
would
good
go.
call.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're gonna see like everybody's starting to phase out of that extra COVID eligibility. Like we're starting to
Mm-hmm.
like really like that sixth, maybe even seventh year men and women are slowly like we're not going to be seeing that really much longer. And I wonder if we're gonna like things are gonna fall off a cliff in terms of like just we were so spoiled. I feel like for the last 2 or so years of just insanely high quality top of field, like top of like the NCAA. Like you just had so many different men and women that were just like running in awesome times, dominating different competitions. I wonder if we're gonna start to see a little that kind of top group break up and not be quite as consolidated as years past.
I think that's totally valid. Like I've always said, like why I think the times are now so fast is because of the shoes, right? I've
Of
always been
course.
very clear about that. But the 10 to 20% factor of that, I think, is also the extra eligibility. You
Mhm.
come back and you're another year older, another year of base training under you. It's just it matters. It very literally matters. And so
Mhm.
I think the extra eligibility is going to, like you said, dwindle off. This is the year where it begins to taper off.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be completely gone after this year because, well, I guess it technically would be because this year's class of 4-year graduates would be after, I think, COVID. So therefore, they didn't get the extra eligibility. Does that make
Yeah, but
sense?
there could be someone who started in 19 that could still have eligibility next year, right? Due to like a injury
Um,
and a COVID year.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Right. So but I think most of it's going to drop after
Yeah.
this year. Not most of it, a lot of it. Um, and then another cycle, another year, you're going to get a little bit more remnants, but then it'll begin
Hmm.
to dissipate. Yeah.
Yeah, something to keep an eye on as we kind of move forward and see like how the macro trends of the sport change because I mean that was obviously a once in a lifetime thing that the NCAA went through and
Well, I hope so. I hope it was once in a lifetime.
and that certainly had a lot of ripple effects that we certainly didn't think of at the time. So the other performance that we wanted to hit on was Suus Altorf of Florida State running 4:13 in the 1500. I believe that, and looking at her World Athletics page, I believe that is a PR for her as well. Finished third at the Crimson Tide Invitational behind Lemngole and Esther Getty, former Alabama athlete. Just really impressive to really put herself in that race, considering fourth place was 4:20, and run a nice PR.
She's talented. Like she's sneaky talented, and she came in with good PRs, and but you kind of go back and look what she did during the winter. Like she's run 204 for 800 meters. She's run 242 for 1,000. She's run 435 in the mile, and
Hmm.
now you kind of tack on the 413. It's like that's about right. And the best part in all of this is that all of these PRs have come since late January. So
Yep.
like she's clearly not at her peak yet. She's clearly still trying to reach her ceiling. And so I do think she has more. 4 different PRs and 4 different events. Um, well, I guess so. I mean, that's substantial. And so watch out for her. She is really good. I remember her coming in and being like, "Oh, she might be a problem one day." And
Hmm.
sure enough, she looks like she is second at ACC mile behind Amina Matug, and she gave her Matug like a nice little challenge. It wasn't overwhelming, but yeah, I like Altorf a lot. I'm not sure I'd say that she's an All American caliber runner yet, but if you come back to me this time next year, I could maybe have my feelings changed.
Yeah, I think she's one. We've done this, I think, with an athlete or two over the last week of just maybe not ready for prime time this year, but all the indications are that she's going to be someone who can compete at the very highest level in a year. So just gonna flag her name. It's good for us to do this as well, so that we're not surprised when we see her pop up in a big way, maybe in the next couple months. Um, but keep an eye on her because it seems like she, like Garrett said, the trajectory's there. She could be nowhere near her ceiling at this point.
Agreed, agreed. Okay, is that it? Think
I
we got
that's
it?
that's all the results I had.
Okay, no, that's good. All right. Well, on the site, go check out. We've got D2, D3 rankings that were posted last week. D1 rankings this week. NAIA rankings are some kind of. We're doing we're going to maybe potentially do something different with NAIA this season. I'm not quite sure yet exactly the specifics, but you guys will see. Brian Clay is next week. I'm going to have a lot of previews out for that. Try to get 1 or 2 out. Full written previews, in-depth predictions. Going to be great. We're going to have someone on site to do some photos as well. So big time there. Go check out YouTube at the Stride Report. climbing towards the goals.
Quick prediction. What's the fastest time in the 1500 meter on the men and women's side that we see at Brian Clay?
Including collegiate?
Or just collegiate. Just collegiate.
I'll say 3:35.
I'm gonna say 3:34. And then on the women's side,
4:06.
Yep.
Yeah. 4:06.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's gonna be awesome. I love like when the performance list just completely changes overnight. It is. Brian Clay is awesome.
Yeah, Mara was like, "Hey, look at the performance." I'm like, "I'm not looking at that until next week. I'm just not like I don't want to get myself too excited."
I think there's one sub 340 on the men's side so far. That is going to be way different in a week.
Yeah, that'll be very, very different. So, go check us out on YouTube. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, 5-star ratings and reviews, and that's it.
All right. Well, until next week, Garrett, I'll talk to you.